Hey, Jesse, can you hear us?
Those you worked the whole week.
What was that? Oh, yeah. I didn't really stay on the beach for 2 weeks. I sat on the beach for 1
I
week.
was like, I don't know, you were working for the whole.
Yeah.
What beach?
I was in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hey, Jesse, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, we can. I'm going to give Melissa maybe another minute or two to pop on.
Okay. And I think with our new code, and this being a work session, I don't need to do roll call and like call the meeting to order and everything. Correct?
Yeah,
Correct.
that's right.
Okay.
And here's
So-
Melissa.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a sore throat, so I'm just gonna go on mute and stay off camera, but I will be listening.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, no worries. Melissa, can you hear us?
And she just go.
I think she just logged on. Oh, there she is.
Oh, yeah.
She's there.
Hey, Melissa, can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, then we will go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us for this work session to go over the changes to the land use code and historic preservation standards and procedure. This is an hour work session. So I know some people have some things going on at 5, so we'll try to wrap up. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask them during the presentation. And if there are big questions that we need to address later, Gloria and I will take notes and be sure to address them at our next meeting. Okay, so before we jump in, I wanted to highlight historic preservation updates. The town has submitted the certified local government application, and that's being reviewed right now. So we expect to hear from them in the next month or so. And the town will begin to send out notices to property owners in the historic overlay district to notify them that this district exists. They are in it, and kind of what the requirements are for being in that district. And this is really to help raise awareness of the historic overlay district, historic preservation efforts, and help property owners make sure that all the work that they're doing follows the code. And then I also wanted to point you guys to the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, who has a ton of resources and trainings for historic preservation commissions and committees for people like you all, as well as for us, for staff. And Gloria had invited you all to a training 2 weeks ago. But I think if you guys have any time, this is a great resource to check out. Sign up for their email list. They do regular trainings. And if you're ever interested in attending one, we can send you guys the voucher card so that you don't have to pay for that training. So yeah. And then the purpose of this work session is really to go over the land use code changes, review the historic preservation standards and procedures, and then answer any questions you guys might have to help you in future development reviews. So this slide kind of shows where we came from, where we're at right now, and where we're going. So as you know, we've been making updates to the historic preservation code and procedures, and with the goal of historic preservation best practices and making the process predictable and easier to navigate, and to expedite planning reviews where we can. So this began with identifying planning, procedural issues in the master plan and development readiness assessment. And then we spent almost 2 years working with stakeholders, this committee, and the community to reestablish standards and procedures related to historic preservation by adopting the new land use code. And so, as I noted earlier, we have submitted our certified local government application. And if we receive that status, we will be eligible for funding to help fund a historic resource survey. And this historic resource survey would kind of officially document our period of significance and the architectural features that go along with that. And that will be, a huge help and a big milestone for us in historic preservation. We can take that information and reevaluate any historic preservation codes as needed to make sure we are in line with our period of significance. So this is our historic overlay district, as you all know and have seen. but just wanted to put this up for you. It spans Blair Street, 10th to 14th, Green Street, 11th to 16th, and includes the county campus. And then just as a reminder, this did not change during the land use code update. And the purpose of the historic district overlay and really historic preservation in Silverton is to create a reasonable balance between private property rights and public interest in preserving the town's unique historic character. And the way we do this is through the protection and preservation of the town's historic and cultural heritage, through the historic overlay district and through the establishment of the town's historic register, the protection and enhancement of quality of life of the town's economy through preservation of historical attractions, and the expansion of public awareness, appreciation, and knowledge for the town's unique local history. So now getting into the land use code. The table of contents, we tried to, organize this so it was pretty straightforward. People could easily find what they were looking for just by looking at the table of contents. But up here is a little cheat sheet for you all, and I'll send this out to everyone after so you have this. But these are really the key code sections related to historic preservation. So we have the design standards, the application process, the designation process, and then information about the Historic Preservation Committee. Any questions so far? That was a lot of information. Okay. Well, now we can get into the Historic District Overlay Standards. And so this slide is kind of an overview of all of the key standards. There's a section on design standards for all development, additional standards for new construction or non-contributing property, and then additional standards for contributing properties. And then just as a reminder, until we have our historic resource survey, all properties that are 50 years or older are considered contributing properties. So that's also why we want to get this resource survey done so that we can update that and make it easier for non-contributing properties. First step is Green Street mixed use requirements. So on Green Street within the historic overlay district, the ground floor of all buildings must be occupied by a business or other activity that encourages pedestrian activity. So things like shops, offices, and galleries. The entire ground floor must meet commercial building codes, and the commercial space must extend at least 20 feet deep of the front facade, allowing for the back portion of the property and upper floors to be residential if desired. So the build to line requires that properties are built to the sidewalk edge, and this is to protect and preserve the historic Green Street and Blair Street, essentially street wall of buildings. Architectural projections. So certain architectural features can extend into the public right-of-way to enhance the historic character if approved by Public Works. And this is mainly seen on Blair Street. So examples are cornices, balconies, canopies, awnings, or certain entry features that can project into the sidewalk. And these features must fit with surrounding historic context and be approved by Public Works. Blank walls. So to maintain an engaging and pedestrian-friendly streetscape, blank walls facing streets are generally not allowed. Street-facing walls should include windows or other visual interests. But if blank walls, the only place that blank walls are really allowed is next to an undeveloped or vacant lot. And if blank walls are unavoidable, there should be certain architectural details like facade accents to break up the large blank wall surface. Screening, this just is a requirement that all utility and mechanical equipment is screened, but there is an exception for solar panels and solar devices.
Excuse me, can we go back to visibility, please?
Yes.
Screening is required for all street and corner lot views. What does that mean?
So if you are looking at a building from the street or from a corner, you should not be able to see any utility or mechanical equipment on like the roof of the building.
Okay.
So that needs to be screened. Yeah. except for solar panels. So those are the design standards for all properties in the historic overlay district. And then these are the additional design standards for new construction and non-contributing properties. So firstly, the new construction must look different, look new, but while still being compatible with the surrounding buildings. And that includes historic materials, scale, and building proportions. Also respecting the historic context. So massing and overall form should complement contributing buildings around them. And then in the code section for this, it lists the full key elements that are reviewed. But here is just a few that we most commonly see: kick plates, windows and transoms, historic entry doors, etc. So when we would get a proposal for new construction, we would want to see some of these elements included. And then here are the design standards for contributing properties. So work on contributing historic buildings must follow standards to preserve their historic integrity while allowing for appropriate updates. Facade treatments is the first one. Large buildings should be broken up into sections that match the scale and character of the original storefront. And so what that means is that each building should look no wider than 50 feet. Entries must be recessed. There must be some element of snow protection. And this usually includes snow guards or a canopy. And then windows must be vertically oriented and arranged in symmetrical balanced patterns. And then the last design standard for contributing properties is that all exterior work and additions must comply with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And there are 10 standards for that that are listed in this document. And I have them on the slides, and we can either go through them or we can skip them. It's up to you guys if you want to go through these. Since they're not technically in our code, they're just referenced.
Well, I was wondering if we can get a copy of this, if we came by City Hall, that way we don't have to go through them.
Is this a requirement for these? Or is it like something that's suggested?
So for contributing properties, they have to meet standards. But then there's also a really extensive list of guidelines from the Secretary of the Interior, and that's recommended for contributing properties. And so we won't go through those, but they're very specific. So like if you're working with, masonry, they're going to have guidelines on how to rehabilitate those properties.
Yeah, I would like to go through the standards, so.
Yeah, we can go through the standards quickly. So there's 10 standards, as I said, and they're listed in this document, which I've sent out to you in the past, but I can send it out again. And then they're listed here word for word. So the first is respecting the original use and layouts. Properties should continue their historic use or be altered in a way where there's minimal changes to the materials and features. Preservation of historic character.
Can you hear us online real quick? Just give us a thumbs up or something. We just had
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, there's been no interruption.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, our microphones were
No, that's
flashing at us.
Original materials and architectural elements that define the property's character should be retained and not removed or altered. And then third, avoid creating a false history. So changes to the property should reflect authentic history. Adding features from other styles or eras would not be appropriate.
Fake bullet holes.
What?
No fake bullet holes.
Yeah, that's a great point. No fake bullet holes. And then number 4, to honor later historic changes. So if there was an alteration done that had become historically significant over time, that should be preserved and not removed. Protecting original craftsmanship, key materials, finishes, and construction techniques should be retained. And then number 6, working to really repair elements rather than replacing them when possible. 7, chemical or physical treatments. So any cleaning or restoration must use the least damaging methods, trying to avoid harsh chemicals. And then preserving archaeological resources. If disturbance is avoidable, proper mitigation steps should be taken and can be shown through the application process. And then new additions should not be an exact replica of the historic building, but should be in a spatial relationship that defines historic character of the property with the new addition. And not to imitate what was already there. And then any new construction that's done should be done in a way that can be removed in the future if the historic property would remain intact and unaltered in its essential form. So those are the 10 standards. And then if we have a major application that comes before you all, those standards will be listed in the application checklist so that you guys can review those as needed. And then again, the guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings is recommended for contributing properties. And then the guidelines are also included in that document that lists the standards. And it's very extensive. So lots of information in there that will be helpful for people. And that is the end of standards. Any questions on any of that? Okay.
I had a question.
Mhm.
Oh, no, that was just in regards to the standards, the US government standards or?
Those, yeah, so
So-
we have gone through the town standards and through the Secretary.
When it comes to the town standards, for new construction, those appear to be more suggestive than, because I see should and may, but I don't see a shall and must. So are those still kind of like, are these like suggested design standards?
These are required. So it's hard, with the key elements, we can't require every single one to be met. But we will need to see that an effort was made to, look different but compatible, respect historic contexts, and that these key elements were included.
Wait, I'm a little confused, Lucy. So for example, if you go back to that slide,
Mhm.
I'm just thinking through the practicality of this. Where did it go? So new construction, respect historic context. So like if it's an empty lot with new construction on it, like we're trying to make it look like the contributing buildings around, but we also should make sure that it's different. I guess like what does this look like in practicality? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand here.
Yeah, that's a great point. So a really big theme in historic preservation is that new construction should be compatible with existing construction, with historic structures. And these touch on elements like materials, scale, and proportions, but should not be, for example, like an exact replica of a historic building.
So they shouldn't pretend to be historic in nature. Is this sort of okay? So that's like the gist of it. But they shouldn't be so like out of the way wacky that it changes the neighborhood dramatically.
Yes.
Like an EC Park.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. Like you look at an EC Park and you know that that's new construction, you understand that that's a new building, but it feels compatible with its surroundings.
Fantastic. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would a revival architecture be like to fit, obviously if someone's using a type of architecture that's a historic kind of architecture, but they're doing a revival, it's like a Victorian revival or something. They're not intending on it being a historic structure, but the architecture style looks historic in general, would that be something accepted?
Yeah, if the style can, can look similar to those of historic buildings, it just can't, it has to, you have to look at it and understand that that's new construction and it's not pretend historic buildings.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And so an example of that is, especially like with an addition, when you're adding an addition to a historic building, you're using modern materials and you see that addition, you understand that that's modern. It's not, using wood and like trying to make the wood look old and, trying to mimic exactly what's on the rest of the structure. And so same thing goes for new construction too. You're not, creating a movie set, I guess.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
It's not Disney.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And that's a great point and something that, we can definitely talk through when we have an application for new construction.
Yeah, I think that would be something where it's like hard to properly voice, but like we would know the difference between Disneyland and not Disneyland.
Yeah,
I got you.
exactly.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now moving on to the processes. So this chart lays out the process for a major historic district overlay application, which is required for large scale projects like new construction, as we were just talking about, or major exterior alterations. And so this process begins with a pre-application meeting with staff to go over all of the standards, all the expectations, and talk through the project. Then the applicant can go through an optional informal meeting. And this is really just an opportunity for the applicant to meet with community members, neighbors, stakeholders, and address any potential issues that might come up in a public hearing. And so informal meetings are typically optional. So this would really only come up for a really large or potentially controversial project. Then the applicant would submit the formal application. Staff would conduct a completeness review to make sure that all the materials are included. And if any referral agencies need to be notified, that would go out, and referral agencies have 2 weeks to respond. And then staff would conduct their formal review, write up a staff report, and then the application would be noticed, or sorry, a public notice would go out 21 days before the Historic Preservation Committee would meet to review that application in a public meeting. And then after the Historic Preservation Committee makes a decision, staff issues a notice of decision. So that's just kind of an overview of that process. And you can see, we have to put out notice, we have to put out, we have to send out to referral agencies. So that's just, this process can take some time and, requires some planning.
And I would say this is different from our previous code, just to emphasize again that the Historic Preservation Committee is the final decision here and it's
Yes.
not the Board of Trustees. So a little bit.
Unless we say no.
Responsibility.
Unless we say no.
Yes, if you all say no, they can appeal,
Mhm.
and that process actually follows the variance process. And that goes to the Board of Trustees.
Thank you.
Yep. And then also new to the code is the Historic Overlay District minor application, which is really great because this really expedites reviews for smaller scale projects like exterior renovations where we're replacing the exact same materials or painting a building the same color. And so this process also begins with a pre-application meeting with staff, optional informal meeting. Staff does completeness check. Referral agencies are notified if required, typically not for these applications. And then staff conducts a formal review and sends out the notice of decision. And staff notice of decisions go into your packets as well as the Board of Trustees packets to review. And then here's another
I
slide.
have a question.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned if you're painting a building the same color. Now, painting a building does not require a historic review, or does it?
Painting does require a minor application.
Okay. And
That's, yeah. Sorry,
yeah,
keep going.
and there's nothing that Yeah, that's odd that painting a building would require review, or I guess I didn't realize that. So could you tell somebody no, they couldn't paint the building a particular color?
Part of the minor review process, as well as, the notice of decisions that are recorded and go into packets, is just really documenting a lot of the activities that go on in the historic overlay district. And so painting is kind of an example of that. We would require a minor application for painting, but the only way that we could say that you would not be allowed to paint your building a certain color would be if we felt that it was really conflicting with the historic character of town. And in a situation like that, I think that that would most likely be bumped up to the Historic Preservation Committee to make a decision on rather than staff. And that's another thing about the minor applications, is staff can bump these up to the committee when we feel necessary.
Okay, understood. And then, I mean, just touch-up painting, right? Of these, I mean, old buildings need painting every year.
That's right. Paint would not require, this would be, a complete, update, complete repainting to the entire building.
Of a different color or the same color?
Thank you.
Of a different color.
Different color.
Yeah.
So if you're repainting your building the same color, you don't have to go through this process?
Yes, if you're like doing like seasonal touch-ups and, weatherizing the building, that's right.
Lucy, can you just clarify for us where this painting rule came from, given that we have not had that in the past? Is that something required by the overlay designation or the CLG or something? Like, where's the painting piece coming from, given that we've heard kind of resoundingly that color doesn't fall under this purview previously?
I think that was just included to ensure that the historic integrity of the district was maintained. But I do agree that that is something that we did kind of talk about during the process, and we would be open to talking about that if you guys weren't comfortable with
Yeah,
that.
I guess, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I guess we have heard resoundingly that folks want this code to be cleaner and not create administrative burden. And so this to me stands out as something that, as we see this code in action, could potentially be a place where we could strike the need for administrative review as we look for ways to reduce administrative burden, given that there's been kind of no need in the past to have this be reviewed.
I disagree. I think we should keep it.
Yeah, and this is something that we can, if this is a topic we want to explore more, we can bring this up in a future meeting.
Yeah, I think we should, because I think the few times that color has come like to the Board of Trustees level, the Board of Trustees has resoundingly said color is not something we're going to adjudicate on. And we've carried that forward to the committee. And that was true as well during like the planning commission days of these reviews as well. So I think this would be a major change. And I don't know that I've heard resoundingly from the public that this is a change that people want. If it's not required by like CLG certification, or it's not a recommendation from, Larry the architect or someone, like, I guess I would want to know sort of what the origin is of including this.
Yeah, I think that, maybe we can have a deeper dive into this one in the future, but I think that it's just reflects best practices for historic preservation. Because I think if we have no, nothing in place, then someone could potentially paint their building in a way that does disrupt the historic integrity of the district. And we would have really no way to combat that. I think that that's probably rare in Silverton and would be kind of an extreme situation. But we'll write that one down and we can come back to that one. Thanks for bringing that one up. And then the last thing I want to just briefly touch on is the historic overlay designation process. And so the town, through the new land use code, has established a register of historic places. which includes designated historic properties. And so properties must be formally designated following the designation code section, which is 15840D, to be added to this register. Properties that are listed on the Colorado State Register and National Register are eligible, but not automatically included, and they must still go through the local designation process. And properties designated to the local register are not added to the state or national register. But they are, properties that are added to the local register are eligible for CLG grants and tax incentives. And properties that are added are essentially added to the historic district overlay. And so those standards would then apply to that property. This has not been established yet. We are really waiting to become a certified local government and potentially to get our resource survey back before we create this process. So there are currently no buildings on the historic district overlay, on the town's register of historic places. So we'll revisit this once we get this registry up and going. And then the last thing is I just wanted to make you all aware that the town recently put all of our zoning layers onto the county's GIS map, which is an awesome feature. And this includes the historic district overlay. So if you ever have someone who is talking to you and they're wondering, I'm historic district overlay, and you don't have a map in front of you, what they can do is they can go to the GIS website, look up their property, and then select the historic district overlay tab, and it will be very clear to them whether or not they're in the historic district overlay.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that was that happened about a month ago at the board direction. So very excited about that.
Was that, were you guys working with Kim on that or? Thanks. Okay.
All right, and that's all I got for you guys. So if you guys have any questions, we can take them now, or can we give you guys 30 minutes back of your day?
No, thank you. That was excellent.
Great.
I think one thing I'd just like to highlight, so we have the color item as a parking lot item for us to come back to and do a bit of a deeper dive on. I'm curious from the team here if there was anything else that was surprising or concerning to you. I mean, I know a lot of these things don't represent big changes, but just while we've had this overview here, I want to give a moment before we close for folks to share that if there's anything they want to voice.
Jesse, I don't think anything, I had already gone through the documents that Gloria had sent out. I mean, so nothing was a surprise. I'm not really going to comment on my view on some of this stuff, but yeah, I don't think anything was necessarily a surprise. A lot of the stuff that we've been the board or this board or stuff that was brought up before this meeting seems to have made it into the land use code and the historic called
Preservation.
historic design.
Design standard?
Well, what's the district?
Historic district overlay,
Historic district overlay. Thank you.
or just the historic district, however you want to call it.
Thanks for sharing that, Alex. Anyone else with a perspective they want to share before we close? Well, Lucy, I just want to share that I'm so grateful to you for putting this together for us. I think this helps ground us in sort of what's changing about the process so that we as a team can be better prepared to meet applications that you elevate to this committee with open eyes. And I would also encourage us to solicit from the public any feedback on these new elements as they go through the process. If anything seems concerning, I know that the land use code overall is something that we've all done our best on here, but the plan is to continually sort of review it and see if there's something that's not fit for purpose. So thanks you guys to everyone on the committee for just representing your community and being eyes and ears on the ground, for anything that feels off about this new section, or becomes onerous for homeowners and business owners in our historic overlay district.
Thank you. All right, great. Well, thank you, everybody. And I will send you out a copy of this.